My head hurts just saying it. There's a reason every news outlet in the country recently ran the headline, "How strong is the case against Trump?" It's their way of saying, don't get your hopes up. Yes, Trump fucked Stormy Daniels at a charity golf event while his wife was home with their newborn. The kind of thing we all assumed Trump was doing. What's your next bombshell? That his hair is a comb-over? The shocking part wasn't the sex, it was that he was involved in a legitimate charity. And to at least half the country, it looks like you tried to get him on Russia, and you tried to get him on Ukraine, and you tried to get him on classified documents, and you didn't. So now you went for the old reliable. Congratulations, you found out powerful men have an Achilles heel, their balls.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Wasdin Wednesday, September the 20th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Shutdown, Competition, My Take, Ayn Rand Quote, Eyewash, Fix the Blame Fast, Rules for Patriots, Rules for Retrogrades, Pressure, No Free Lunch, The Rape of the Mind, Patriotic Songs, Bishop-Barron, and SEAL Team 6. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now there's no free lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
The great danger to the consumer is the monopoly, whether private or governmental. His most effective protection is free competition at home and free trade throughout the world. The consumer is protected from being exploited by one seller by the existence of another seller from whom he can buy and who is eager to sell to him. Alternative sources of supply protect the consumer far more effectively than all the Ralph Naders of the world. Milton Friedman. Nader was an appropriate target in the context and timing of this writing, but there are countless substitutes available since. At the heart of free trade is not just the lower cost of production for the producer that comparative advantage creates, it is also the benefits to the consumer that lower cost and greater choice represents.
And that's There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
Stages of thinking and delusion. Here I follow in part the classification of S. Ferenczi and that of my own book on delusion. The psyche is constantly confronted with and communicating with the outside world, and at every phase of an individual's development, that world and its events are experienced differently. Although different scientists have drawn different conclusions about the various phases and their implications, the very recognition of change and growth of personal outlook is one of the most important scientific findings in psychology, and is agreed on by all psychologists. Let me briefly explain here the developmental approach to human psychology. It is not the only one, but it will serve to illustrate the tremendous impact of immature and delusional thinking on our final opinions. Developmental psychology, as studied in children and primitives, posits at the origin of thinking in both the individual and the race a hallucinatory stage of the mind in which there is no experience or difference between the inside and the outside world. The mental separation and distantation between the self and the world has not yet taken place. The psyche is felt to be omnipotent. All that is experienced inside the self is attributed to the universe as well and is imagined to be part of that universe. According to developmental psychology, the infant experiences the world in this way, and in certain types of insanity, the adult will revert to this hallucinatory stage. Yet, even mature man does not succeed completely in separating internal fantasy from outside reality. And often he thinks that his private and subjective moods are caused by some external actuality. In the next stage, that of animistic thinking, there is still a partial sense of oneness between the ego and the world. The individual's inner experience, his fears, his feelings are projected onto seeming causative agents in the outside world. The outside world is a continual demonic threat to him. The child who bumps against the table projects onto that table a hostile living power and hits back. The primitive tribesman hunted by beasts of prey attributes to the animal he feared a divine power, that of a hostile god. The entire outside world may, in fact, be peopled with the fears of men. In times of panic and fear, we may all populate our neighborhood with non-existent traitors or fifth columnists. Our animistic thinking is continually busy accusing others of what actually occurs inside our own minds. Nowadays, there are no devils and ghosts in trees and in wild animals. They have made their homes in the various scapegoats created by dictators and demagogues. The third stage is that of magical thinking, in which there is still a sense of intimate connection between man and his outside world. However, man places himself more in opposition to the world than in union with it. He wants to negotiate with the mysterious powers around him. Magic is, in fact, the simplest strategy of man. He has discovered that he can manipulate the world with signs and gestures, or sometimes with real actions or changes. He erects totem poles and sacrificial blocks. He makes talismans and strange medicines. He uses words as powerful signs to change the world. He develops a ritual to satisfy his need for coming to terms with the outside world. Which of us has not felt a sudden desire to count cobblestones, or is not the jealous possessor of an amulet, or some other secret token whose power would be lost if its existence were known to the others? Immature as they are, these tokens serve to build up happiness and a good life. We all still live in the world of magic and are caught in the delusion of happy manipulation of nature. The modern tribe drives around in mechanized cars and becomes a megalomaniac sorcerer of the wheel. Millions of victims are brought to the altar of the god speed because our hidden delusion that frenzied rapidity prolongs life. The engine and the gadget have replaced the more mysterious amulet of earlier days. Knowledge is still the service of power instead of in the service of understanding. In the last phase of mental development, man makes a complete separation between himself and the outside world. He not only lives with things and tries to manipulate them, but he also lives in opposition to them. In this phase of mature reality confrontation, man becomes an observer of his own life. He recognizes the abyss of his own being. He sees his body and mind as separate from the world. With hands, ears, eyes, and his controlling mind, he confronts reality. He steps back from the world and observes it. He is, in fact, the only animal that walks erect, straightforwardly facing the world. He's the only animal that uses his hands and his senses as verifying instruments. Gradually, his own mind-body becomes an instrument whose drives he may accept or reject. Only man is able to see his drives and instincts as either dangerous or useful. Man not only knows an externally imposed fear, but he knows an inner fear of losing the inner controls he has acquired at so high a price. With arms and hands, man reaches out, not only toward the outside world, which he once hoped to conquer with magic gestures as a baby does, but he also knowingly reaches out toward an inside world. Mature man lives between an inner and an outer world. There is something tragic about this laborious process of becoming conscious of a separate inner and outer reality. In becoming mature, man awakens from a sweet primitive dream in which he was part of an individual whole, part of a nirvanic world of equanimity. The sense of lost unity with the universe lingers on, and in moments of mass tension, or in times of crisis, he reaches toward that ancient experience of impersonal, irresponsible bliss. Utter passivity or self-destruction, artificial ecstasy obtained by means of drugs, the suicidal wish for eternal sleep, all are devices by which man hopes to fulfill that eternal yearning. At what stage in connection with these developments of human experience may we speak of delusion? When the member of a primitive tribe placates the mysterious and hostile world by prayer to his totem animal, we do not call this delusion. But a man who has attained to a more advanced stage of thinking relapses into such primitive habit of thought, then it is possible to call this falling back, retrogression, a delusion.
And that was Stages of Thinking and Delusion from The Rape of the Mind by Joost-Meerlo, M.D. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, rules for retrogrades, 40 tactics to defeat the radical left.
Rule 22. Do not ingest the poison pill of conventional wisdom. General Patton once observed, "If everybody is thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking." What has come to be viewed as safe and irrefutable wisdom, namely that cache of platitudes uncritically imbibed by the baby boomer generation in their own time and then mechanically regurgitated by them as sacred truth, a one-size-fits-all miracle balm for all situations, is really a roadmap for how to be outfoxed by radicals and lose the culture in just a few short years. As sanctimonious as the boomers have been in doling out their empty bromides, the critically thinking retrograde must be equally diligent in rejecting them. Why the boomers are comfortable scolding retrogrades for not closely adhering to their losing set of rules of engagement is anyone's guess. Consider this. In just a couple of decades, from the 1960s to the 1970s, America's culture was successfully co-opted and transformed by a loud minority of strung-out radicals, while conservative boomers, hamstrung by their ill-conceived sensibilities, offered mere token resistance, giving way at every turn. 20 years' time gave us no-fault divorce, abortion on demand, ubiquitous contraception, mainstream feminism, the working mother, religious indifferentism, the welfare state in the form of the Great Society, draconian environmentalism, destigmatized drug use and fornication, and a watershed federal piece of gun control legislation, the Gun Control Act of 1968. Yet, conservative boomers feign indignance when younger generations refuse to march in lockstep with their feckless advice. It's like the Cleveland Browns demanding, with straight faces, that the rest of the NFL's teams should make use of their playbook. No thanks. We'll look elsewhere, anywhere else. Boomers, you failed us. Your time is up. Kindly retire to the ignominy of the shadows and rid us of your bad ideas once and for all. So what are examples of the sorts of boomerisms that are to be spurned with extreme prejudice? The list is long, but it's worth producing some notable examples for posterity. Boomers are obsessed with cosmetics over substance. They insist on scolding retrogrades for the tone that we use when doing ideological battle against radicals. They have made "thou shalt be nice" into the 11th commandment. They are constantly finger-wagging at zealous young retrogrades who proclaim truth with fiery speech. They insist that retrogrades must use a sanitized speaking style, devoid of passion, devoid of flair, devoid of any hint of righteous anger about the iniquity of the left. They believe that it's inherently sinful to use speech with teeth, to show ire, to meet evil ideas with harsh rebuke, when in fact, Thomas Aquinas teaches just the opposite. It's disordered to not act on righteous anger, to let evil go undenounced, according to the angelic doctor. Bold, clear, and sometimes angry speech is the only kind of speech that is effective in calling the hoi polloi out of the stupor into which they've been placed by the constant deluge of radical propaganda. If Trump's 2016 presidential campaign shows us anything, it shows just how foolish the mindless boomer attachment to anodyne speech really is. We were breathlessly told by conventional pundits during the course of the election that Trump would have to soften his tone to win the general election because suburban women don't like negativity. In the wake of Trump's resounding victory, have the talking heads recanted their flawed advice? Have they reconsidered their attachment to insipid, idle affirmation? Of course not. Nevertheless, what matters is what you say, not how you say it. Don't let anyone tell you differently. The biblical prophets and the apostles were caustic at times in delivering the good news when the occasion called for it, when the actions of their flocks occasioned stern rebuke. Don't let pusillanimous boomers convince you that there is an inherently sinful tone. There isn't. What matters is substance. Style is prudential and individual. The mystical body of Christ has many parts. Some of us are called to be the killer T cells. Perhaps had the boomers delivered more Jeremiads in their own time, we would have been spared rampant societal cancers like abortion, feminism, and divorce. Another self-evidently flawed boomerism is that peaceability is inherently virtuous, that peace is an end in and of itself. Cowards never admit their cowardice. They always cloak it in the extravagant garb of magnanimity. When boomers have sounded the call for retreat on a whole slew of pressing cultural and political ideas, they have always couched their decision to stop fighting settled cultural battles in a slavish commitment to national unity and peace. But as Christ himself tells us, peace isn't to be embraced at the expense of justice. It is for this reason that he announced that he came to bring not peace, but a sword. Not only is it not virtuous to roll over and accept radical victories in regard to fundamental cultural questions, such as the protection of life, the preservation of marriage, and the unchecked expansion of a runaway federal government, it's actually sinful. But boomers have declared that their lack of fight on bellwether issues is actually noble. Don't be deceived. Fighting isn't inherently sinful. Sometimes it's sinful not to fight. Perhaps the most noxious boomerism, the one most stridently and priggishly espoused, is that it's inherently wrong to pronounce moral judgment on others. It has been said that an insufficient amount of Christianity is more dangerous than no Christianity at all. The campaign against judging others is proof of this. Sitting on their high horses, boomers have ripped out of context and weaponized one of the few Bible verses that the lukewarm actually know, to the detriment of Christ and his church, truth, and Western culture. Where Christ exhorts, "Judge not that you be not judged," he's certainly not telling us to refrain from labeling certain agents and actions as good and others as evil. If he were, then he couldn't, without contradicting himself, instruct us elsewhere to judge with right judgment. And if your brother sins against you, rebuke him. What Christ is telling us is to not presume to condemn others, pronouncing definitive judgment on the eternal destination of their souls, since this is God's prerogative. He's also telling us not to harp on the relatively small flaws of others to the neglect of our own larger flaws. However, the righteous man, whose flaws are relatively benign compared with the vices of baser men, actually has a duty to correct others. This is why the church has long recognized that admonishing the sinner is one of the spiritual works of mercy. Not only should we not refrain from making moral judgments about others, we are actually bound in our consciences to make such judgments in order to guide the culture in a just direction and to care for the souls of our fellow men. One must affirmatively distinguish what is good from what is evil in order to know what to do and what not to do, to know what to vote for and what not to vote for, to know when to celebrate and when to fight, and to know who is good and who is bad. To deliberately abstain from making moral judgments about agents and actions is to embrace moral relativism, the arch-heresy of heresies, the denial of objective truth itself. While it is impossible to, here, compile a plenary list of the various and sundry false platitudes that together constitute the platform of conventional wisdom, one should be guided by the rule, common sense is not so common. Whatever advice is rendered to the retrograde, he must take pains to examine it carefully before heeding it. No rule is to be considered beyond reproach, save those reflecting the eternal moral law. We must therefore be inquisitive of the track record of every dispensary of advice. If he is reciting the playbook of an unsuccessful era, we must be firm and loud in our rejection of his ideas. To draw from an axiom that is based on truth, it is insanity to do the same thing over and over again while expecting a different result. If we do not allow ourselves to be quagmired by sacrosanct tropes from the past, we have a better chance of winning back the culture of the future. Think critically and stay sharp. Never be content to be part of the herd.
And that was Rules for Retrogrades, Rule 22, 40 Tactics to Defeat the Radical Left by Timothy and David Gordon. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Rules for Patriots by Steve Deese.
Chapter 2. Commandment number 1. Never trust Republicrats. Republicrat, noun, plural being Republicrats. Segment of the American ruling class pretending to be conservatives by paying lip service to conservative principles and camouflaging themselves in patriotic imagery. Often confused with rhinos, Republicans in name only, but Republicrats are far more dangerous because they've learned how to campaign on conservative talking points. Unlike the rhino who campaigns and governs from the middle left, the Republicrat campaigns as a conservative and then governs middle left. Once in office, the record of the Republican is virtually indistinguishable from the Democrat, regardless of the campaign rhetoric, either because of cowardice, deception, or a combination of both. Cicero, one of ancient Rome's most famous orators and philosophers, might as well have been talking about Republicrats when he said, quote, "A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banner openly. But the traitor moves amongst those within the gate freely, his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. For the traitor appears not a traitor, he speaks in accents familiar to his victims, and he wears their face and their arguments. He appeals to their baseness that lies deep in the hearts of all men. He rots the soul of a nation or movement. He works secretly and unknown in the night to undermine the pillars of the city. He infects the body politic so it can no longer exist or resist. A murderer is less to fear." Conservatives have spent decades fighting to purge rhinos, Republicans in name only, from the Republican Party, but it turns out the Arlen Specters of the world were little more than a diversion. To a lesser extent, the same could be said of the left. While it is true they would love nothing more than to shred whatever is left of our beloved Constitution and transform our republic into a Western European-style socialist mobocracy, they cannot do it alone. Culprits always need collaborators, especially when they hold minority views in a majority rules country. Twice as many Americans describe themselves as ideologically conservative rather than liberal. 3 times more Americans believe in some variant of the biblical account of creation as the origin of the human species than do atheistic evolution, or that humans evolved from natural means alone. Less than 2% of the American population identifies themselves as homosexual. 74% of Americans want the government to cut deficits. Only 8% of Americans want tax increases to be the focus of deficit reduction, and a majority of Americans favor scrapping the federal income tax altogether. 75% of Americans oppose funding the killing of children with taxpayer dollars. I could continue citing public opinion data that is similarly favorable to conservatives on a wide swath of issues, but by now, you get the picture. Yet, despite widespread public approval for many basic conservative principles, the statists still maintain widespread control of the government schools, the ruling class routinely caves to the moral depravity lobby, the government continues to grow regardless of who's in power, and the child killers at Planned Parenthood continue to pick the taxpayer's pocket. To understand why this is the case, you must first understand the 3 primary languages used in contemporary American politics. The first, and sadly least spoken, is plain English, which is the language spoken by those of us that actually believe the original wording of the Constitution means exactly what it says. Unfortunately, without cultural revival coming soon, this common sense form of expression could become a dead language. The second, and sadly most spoken, is political correctness. This Orwellian doublespeak introduces self-contradictory terms like marriage equality, when any guy that's been married for more than 6 months can tell you there's no such thing, and reproductive freedom, which doesn't make sense since you're killing your reproduction anyway, so why would you want the freedom to reproduce in the first place? This language takes commonly used terms and phrases and strips all common sense from them, thus changing their long-standing and previously acknowledged meanings. For example, tolerance used to mean I put up with you even if I disagree with you because it's a free country. But nowadays, under political correctness, tolerance means you lose your freedom if you don't validate and participate in everything I do that you don't approve of. The third language is a technocratic dialect used only by the Republican ruling class. It is meant to throw grassroots conservative patriots off the scent before they realize the Republicans they're supporting are doing practically nothing they were sent there to do. It attempts to convince conservatives that their elected representatives believe in the same plain English they do. However, the group communicating the message means something totally different than those receiving it think/hope they do. So the mind-numbing cliches intentionally get lost in translation. Republican lingo is sometimes also referred to as gibberish, jargon, or the crass description for the byproduct of a bull's bowel movement. I have spent years observing Republicans in their natural habitat in an earnest attempt to make sense of this foul beast, wreaking havoc on humanity, not to mention the U.S. Constitution. After much careful study, I believe I finally discovered the Republicrat Rosetta Stone and have cracked their confusing code of complete crap. What I found here is there are 10 phrases used most often by Republicrats. If we can decipher the true meaning of these 10 phrases, unlocking the rest of their sinister secrets instantly becomes much easier. Number 10, something must be done, which really means better to violate our oath of office and betray our base now rather than risk the wrath of the liberal media later. Now, most of the worst ideas in human history begin with cries that something must be done, but when Republicrats utter that phrase, that is a tell they're about to do exactly what the progressive Marxist leftists want them to do. They just need to conjure up a phony crisis in order to justify it. Number 9, Reagan couldn't get nominated today, which really means thank goodness conservatives don't have a real leader like that nowadays to expose our scam. This is a whiny lament frequently utilized by those who either hated Ronald Reagan back in the day or put up with him because he was a winner. Even before he left office, many of these same people systematically went about undoing his legacy in order to maintain their corporatist gravy train. Now that Reagan isn't around to speak for himself, and given the fact conservatives lack leaders with his considerable skills, these political hacks use this line every time. Conservatives demand Republicans act like Republicans and not Democrats. Number 8, leadership. Now, when they say that, that really means surrender to Democrats and liberal media now, before it's too late. The Republicrats' primary motivation is to avoid the searing pain of being called nasty names by the liberal media or not being described as reasonable by their Democrat colleagues. So while they use all of our attack words on camera or in press releases, that's really just a signal to the American left they're ready to negotiate the terms of surrender once they've correctly patronized their base with the talking points that gives them the warm fuzzy. Number 7, whenever you hear a Republican say, we need to focus on jobs, that really means, thank goodness the economy sucks, so we have an excuse for standing for nothing. Please note, this self-explanatory Republican mantra is only used when Democrats are in power in any branch of government and does not apply when the Republicans are. When Republicans are in power, substitute any reference to socialism or Jimmy Carter as the appropriate scare tactic for that situation. Number 6, when the Republican says team player, that really means somebody who cares more about being liked, getting their ego stroked, advancing their own ambitions, and or getting a seat at our very wobbly table more than they like taking a righteous stand. The prime directive of the Republicrat machine is to beget more Republicrats in order to perpetuate their taxpayer-funded fraud. If someone isn't a team player, it's because that person actually got into politics to govern on a set of conservative principles, and they stubbornly insist on sticking to those principles. Therefore, their very existence threatens to expose the entire Republicrat charade. The Republicrats will typically punish such would-be statesmen by excommunicating said non-team player from all Republicrat functions and cutting off his access to the campaign purse strings. Better for one principled patriot to die than for their entire scam to perish. Number 5, when you hear a Republican talk about the big tent, know that it really means marginalize conservatives to avoid exposing the fact we're actually embarrassed by the Republican Party platform. Despite all the strategic talk of winning elections, the real reason Republicrats seek to bring in those who don't really believe in small government and Judeo-Christian morality is to dilute the influence within the party of those that do. Number 4, when you hear a Republican say the Democrats weren't going to budge, know that really means we either don't care about your moral convictions or don't share them. Either way, thank the God we constantly patronize with our contrived talking points. We've still got the Democrats around to shift the blame to when we just really want to go home, or living up to our campaign promises to shrink government and defund Planned Parenthood is just too dang hard.
And that was Rules for Patriots, How Conservatives Can Win Again by Steve Deese. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
Let's face it, we are all haunted by death. So no matter what you accomplish in your life, no matter how much you've achieved, what you've managed to produce or whatever, we all know that it's going to be swallowed up in our own death. And that's led some philosophers and others to say, what's the point? Life is just absurd, isn't it? Death has the final say. I will open your graves and have you rise from them. Here's the God of Israel now speaking to us. This is the God of the Bible, the true God, who does not think that death has the final say, who announces his purpose clearly to open our graves and have us rise from them. He's the God of the living, not the God of the dead. He wants to breathe life into us, to revive these dry bones. No matter how final we think death is, God is more powerful.
Thank you. And now, Stuart-Varney's My Take.
Markets, and now this. The price of oil today is around $90 a barrel, 91 to be precise. When President Biden took office in January 2021, it was $55 a barrel. Regular gas today averages $3.87. January 2021, $2.53. Diesel, the industrial fuel, $4.58 a gallon today, $3.03 when Biden walked into the Oval Office. That is energy policy failure, certainly for consumers and businesses. But it's a bigger failure than that. When Biden cut production and halted pipelines, he opened the door to Russia. They don't care about climate change. They were only too willing to sell their oil to China. He played right into their hands. Then he begs the Saudis to produce more, and they respond by producing less. He begs Venezuela for their oil, and they respond by sending us their poverty-stricken migrants. All of this and global CO2 emissions go up. On how many levels can you fail? But wait, there's more. Biden has run down our oil reserves. There's only 350 million barrels left, half what it was when he took office. What do we do if there's a genuine emergency? That's a security issue, isn't it? And Biden has encouraged the outflow of capital from the oil industry. So you can't just wave your little magic wand and raise production. One last point. The 15 major oil companies doing business in the U.S. made $36 billion just between April and June. That's profit. I'll put that down to a win for big oil and a big loss for the big oil haters. Afghanistan, crime, migrants, inflation, energy, failures all. Second hour of Varney. We're just warming up.
And so that was Stuart Varney. What he's good at is pretending he's concerned about things he couldn't care less about. He doesn't give a damn about anything that he was just talking about, other than its potential to make him rich. He is involved with Fox. Fox is a for-profit news organization. That means they get their profits from the misery of other people. And so therefore, we need to have non-profit news now. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand quote of the day from What is Capitalism? Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Quote, America's abundance was not created by public sacrifices to the common good, but by the productive genius of free men who pursued their own personal interests and the making of their own private fortunes. Unquote. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a few words about this impending shutdown. This happens about every 6 months. The Republicans know it's going to happen, so do the Democrats. And the Republicans really always seem to be caught flat-footed. They always wait to the last minute to deal with the situation. They should have had a plan or a strategy to deal with this going into this situation, but they don't yet again. And it doesn't seem to matter which Republicans are in the House. It just they I don't know. I just don't get it. They just don't figure it out. Get your ducks in a row long before this happens, but they don't. Now, I'm not concerned about a government shutdown. Couldn't care less. Shut it down as far as I'm concerned. What I'm concerned about is that the Freedom Caucus is going to make everybody look like a jackass, like they did with the election of Speaker McCarthy, where they held out and held out and held out and then eventually relented and voted in Speaker McCarthy because they didn't have the balls to wield power. And as I have said, that power is not for sissies. If you're a sissy, you shouldn't be wielding power. And so that's what the Freedom Caucus has to do, a gut check. Do we have the balls to wield power? Yes or no? If we don't, then we should do whatever the speaker tells us to do and be done with it. Because if we're going to go through this big charade where everybody jumps up and down, screams and yells, no, I'm not going to, and then eventually they go ahead and sign off on what it is the speaker wanted in the first place, again, they make themselves and everybody else that supports them look like jackasses. With Speaker McCarthy, if they'd done what I told them to do, they wouldn't be having this problem because there would be no Speaker McCarthy. There wouldn't be any. Also, every time they lose, every time they do something stupid and make themselves look like a jackass, they open themselves up to increasing amounts of pressure. The next time that they want to take a stand, more and more people, especially in the Republican Party, are going to jump up and down and scream and yell about it. And all that creates more pressure on these folks to moderate their position. So, again, this is a power situation. If you're going to exercise power, do a gut check and have the guts to exercise the power. Don't go sissy on us. Exercise the power, make the stand, and go all the way. If you can't do that, if it scares you, if it makes you want to wet your pants, then stay home. Back in a minute. Thank you. A couple more things on the shutdown. I was listening to the bloody tourist Stuart-Varney, and he had a guest on that was whining and complaining about the Republican majority is imploding, and that in order to, I guess, that there was some bill in which 5 Republicans actually joined the Democrats to try to get it passed. And they were shaking their heads as though that was a terrible thing. And as a matter of fact, Stuart-Varney said, oh, it's terrible, awful. No, it isn't. It's perfectly exactly what we need here. We need competition. The problem, as I've stated before, is that we have 2 political parties, both of which are vying for one-party rule. That's what Mitch McConnell wants. Mitch McConnell's dream is that you just maintain the status quo as much as possible. Don't create too many waves in the House of Representatives. And then next election, 2024, then we're going to load up the Senate, get a majority in the Senate, and hopefully a Republican president. Then once you have a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and an increased majority in the Republican House, then they'll be able to do something. In other words, we will then have one-party rule. No, that's not what this is all about. Number one, it's not called the House of Republicans and Democrats. It's called the House of Representatives. Everybody's job in the House of Representatives is to represent their constituents, their district. Same thing with the Senate. They represent their constituents. They represent a particular state. That's what they do. They don't represent the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. So the idea that some Republicans are going to go over and caucus with, even temporarily, Democrats is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And as I've always encouraged, I'm hoping that we can get Democrats to become Republicans, to vote Republican, and that we need to recruit Democrats. We need to take advantage of the Democrat Party's implosion, the fact that they're destroying themselves with all of these insane policies that they're supporting, and use that as a lever to get more Democrats to become Republicans. And it's called competition. When we start doing that, then the Democrats will have no choice. They will have to compete for Republican votes. Right now, it is Democrats get their base together, Republicans get their base together, and they only fight over the independents. Okay? And really what they should be doing is trying to appeal to all voters and saying the Republican Party is what's best for America, and this is why. And the Democrats can make their pitch, and we go from there. That's what should be happening. It's called competition. And if competition is good for business, it's absolutely essential in politics. Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm listening to Buck and Cluck on the radio, and they're talking about an initiative in the city of Chicago where they're trying to, the idea is to have the city of Chicago basically run grocery stores in low-income areas. And so Buck and Cluck are analyzing this as to why it is that they're doing this, and they're saying, well, it's not because they care about the people, and that's true, but their analysis is flawed. And it's flawed because constantly the right makes this mistake of analyzing every left-wing proposal as a discrete quantity, as a discrete event, and not connected to anything else in society or history. And this is connected. Here's what happens. The left refuses to recognize that there's consequences for one's actions. So when they come out and they say, oh, well, we're going to get rid of cash bail. We're going to go soft on crime. Okay. And that's what they used to be called back in the 70s and 80s. Soft on crime, tax and spend. And so when you do that, certain things are going to happen. You have a proliferation of crime. Criminals are going to get the message that crime is A-OK, not only within that or city, but from other areas. For instance, in Los Angeles, because of the reputation of the county, Los Angeles County District Attorney has gotten around. We now have criminals that are coming from all over the state and from out of state, coming here into LA County to commit crimes, usually organized types of crimes, the smash and grabs, because they know that, number one, it's unlikely that they're going to get caught, and number two, if they get caught, they're going to be released immediately, and the charges are going to be low, and any potential prison sentence is going to be equally low. Okay, so those are the consequences. So what happens if you're getting a lot of smash and grabs? The stores move away. So in Chicago, if you have a high tolerance for crime, then businesses like Walmart, which has a grocery section, are going to leave. Their profitability is going to be diminished, and they're going to close down and move somewhere else. And so the left, they don't want to come out and say, oh, wow, what a bummer. We created a situation where now in poor neighborhoods, the people in this poor neighborhood are no longer going to be able to get fresh groceries, right? So what we should do then is undo our policy undo our attitude and policy of being soft on crime and go back to being tough on crime. And that will draw the businesses back, and we don't have to spend taxpayer money with these patchwork eyewash. That's what it is. Then they don't have to do all this eyewash. But again, instead of admitting that it's their policies that had negative consequences on the poor people of Chicago, they just come up with a workaround or eyewash. Back in a minute. Thank you. So I'm listening to John and Ken, and there's a case where that you guys may have heard of in L.A., in which an L.A. County deputy was just sitting in his patrol car. Somebody pulls up alongside him and kills him, shoots him to death. and murders him. So they caught the guy day or two later, and it was through help from the community, and they arrested the individual for murder, and then the family of this individual then says, well, but you don't understand, he's insane. He was off of his meds. Then we come to find out today that some research has been done and found out that he beat somebody to death, a woman to death, a number of years ago, or maybe even a couple of decades ago, and he was found not guilty by reason of insanity and put in a mental hospital. And then not too long ago was certified to get out. Now, how it is that he got access to the gun, that's the interesting part. How did this guy get a gun? Now, all the gun laws that we have, and he still got a gun. But anyway, so he goes, of course, off of his medication and then kills somebody else. Today, there's a judge deciding whether or not he is sane enough to stand trial. So we may end up going through this whole procedure all over again. Now, John and Ken had the district attorney from the state, from Orange County on. They don't usually talk to the district attorney from LA County because he's a dud, and good for them for not doing so. He doesn't need any more name recognition, for his next election. So, but this guy is Todd Spitzer from Orange County, and he is one of the better people, better attorneys, district attorneys, politicians, etc. in the state. As I say, there are no good guys in politics. I don't know if there ever was, but there definitely isn't any now. No good guys on Capitol Hill and no good guys in Sacramento. There just aren't. So I've said in my book, there's a new book that I'm writing called The Rules for True Conservatives. And in it, I say you have to externalize, that we've all been trained by our enemies to internalize problems. And what that really means is trying to understand. And this effort to understand is also part of something called determinism, but that's for some other time. Right now, the point is that this affects people that you can see every day. And today I saw it or heard it with John and Ken, who kept asking the district attorney, why? Why is this happening? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't blah, blah, blah? Why? And they were all questions designed to understand. And then when you get the questions answered, you go, oh, okay. And then you walk away. And then everybody wants to know, well, why is nobody doing anything? It's because we don't externalize anymore. If this situation had happened 40 years ago, 50 years ago, if it had happened during the time when I was growing up, when we were in the habit of externalizing, they wouldn't have the Orange County district attorney on and asking him, why is this happening? They would have asked him, why aren't you doing something about it? That's the question to ask. To externalize means one thing, and that there's a phrase, fix the blame fast. That was one of the ideas that the left attacked in the 70s. They said that they replaced blame with understanding. Understanding makes you docile. Nothing changes because you remain docile. So I say we all need to quit understanding and quit making an effort to understand. All we need to know is the difference between right and wrong. Is it right or is it wrong to murder a sheriff's deputy? Is it right or is it wrong to murder a woman by beating her over the head 47 times? Is it right or is it wrong to let somebody out of the mental hospital and leave them to their own devices in terms of taking their medication? Is it right or wrong for the individual to have stopped taking his medication? That's all we need to know. Once we have the answers to those questions, that's it. Otherwise, everything gets muddy. Everything becomes very complicated. That's why you always got to watch out for the people who say, well, it's complicated. No, it isn't. At the end of the day, it's very simple. It's right or it's wrong. And so what John and Kennan should have done is they should have grabbed up Mr. Spitzer by the collar, verbally speaking, of course, and yelled at him and said, "What the hell are you doing to make this stop?" Put the pressure on him. And if you want to say, well, oh, but it's Sacramento, we don't give a damn, we're not interested in listening to your goddamn excuses, you're a big shot district attorney. And that is the way it is. He's a big shot district attorney. If you or I call the state capitol, nobody's going to take our call. Hey, I want to talk to the governor. I'm kind of upset about this deputy thing and this guy that I want to talk to the governor. Nobody's going to take our call. He's not going to bother with us. But if Todd Spitzer calls up Sacramento and says, this is the district attorney for the county of Orange, and I need to talk to the governor, they'll take his call. Okay? If the governor's not available right away, he'll get back to him. You can bet your sweet bippy, because Mr. Spitzer's a big shot. He's a big shot in politics, big shot in law. Okay? So, put the pressure on our elected representatives and executives and the people in the legal department. Don't ask why. How come this is happening? The real question is, why aren't you doing something about it? Well, this is a problem. Why aren't you fixing it? Every public official in the state should be doing something to fix this problem. If the politicians in the state of California put half as much effort into solving this problem as they do in solving non-existent problems, then this problem would be solved. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Born Again Sniper from SEAL Team 6.
9. Born Again Sniper. After General Garrison had thrown the BS flag on all of JSOC's snipers, both SEAL and Delta operators, we saw the light. There's no way we could make that 800-yard shot every time under any condition. One of us was so far off that he hit the windowsill. We repented of our sins by spending a month coming up with what we could actually do every single time, regardless of climate, time of day, fatigue, which plays a big part, slant, elevation, country, hemorrhoids, etc. Shooting on rainy days, cold days, crawling out of the sewer, we tried it all. We were born again. We can make a body shot on land at 500 yards every single time under every condition. Each day, every sniper would go to the range and shoot his 10 rounds, and he better have a killing shot. 8 out of 10 in the outer 5 ring and at least 2 in the inner 4 ring on an FBI regulation target. SEAL Team 6 held a shoot-off to determine its best sniper. Out of the 18 snipers there, I came in first. That didn't go over well with the snipers who'd been around longer than I had. Country, who had been in Team 6 a year longer than me, came in second. From Alabama, he was a big, fun-loving, good old boy with sandy brown hair who often spoke in his native southern drawl about hunting. What he killed, how he prepared it, and how it tasted. Probably started hunting when he was 10 years old. Unlike me, he had more shooting experience from childhood. That experience can be a double-edged sword, though. Some snipers have to unlearn bad habits. SEAL Team 6 sent Country and me as a 2-man team to the big sniper competition on the Delta compound in North Carolina. Each of the other SEAL teams also sent their best 2. So did Delta, Ranger, a rapid Army light infantry unit that can fight against conventional and special operations targets, battalions, FBI hostage rescue team, HRT, Secret Service, the local Cumberland County Sheriff's Department, and others. Each morning at the Delta Range, we started out doing a cold bore shot from 200 yards on a clay pigeon, a small target made of pitch and pulverized limestone rock in the size and shape of an inverted saucer, taped on a white silhouette target. For Country and me, it was an easy shot. When the bullet struck,
The clay pigeons sprayed into dust. Everybody who missed had to buy a case of beer. The FBI and Secret Service snipers bought a case of beer almost every day. We also did an unknown distance cold bore shot, the hardest, using no laser rangefinder. After the target popped up, we identified it as friend or foe, shooting enemies before they ducked out of sight. In slant range shooting, we shot from high in a building down to a target, requiring a calculation different from other shots. In another event, we had to run to a position, set up in a sniper hide, and shoot. Country ran up the 4-story building with my rifle and set it up. I ascended the stairs behind him. Because I didn't have the extra weight of my weapon, when I arrived in position, I could calm down my breathing more quickly, within a few seconds. Clearing my mind to think about nothing had become automatic. I squeezed off the shot at a target across from me in another building. Bullseye. Our long-range event ranged from 500 to 750 yards to the target. Only a few teams could really compete at that distance. SEAL Team 6, Delta, some Rangers, and the Department of Energy, DOE nuclear power plant. They had great training and equipment, sniper pairs. Country and I became the top sniper team at the competition until the morning of the last day. We finished some preliminary shots. I spotted one target for Country and he engaged it. Then I spotted another target. Country had his crosshairs on the target, and as he squeezed the trigger, the hostage target moved. Damn. What? I asked. I think I just grazed the hotel. Hotel meant hostage. If we had not shot at all, we would have scored 0 points, still having enough points to win the competition. Even though it wasn't a killing shot, we still lost 10 points for nicking a hostage. The winning sniper pair included a Ranger who had gone to Marine Sniper School with me in Quantico. I think Delta came in second. The Savannah River Department of Energy sniping team placed third. Do not mess with DOE nuclear sites. Even though Country and I lost big points for that mistake, we still finished fourth overall. In the teams, though, fourth only means third place loser. Country and I were not pleased. The FBI HRTs and Secret Service finished last, even behind the good old boys from the local sheriff's department. Even so, it's better to make mistakes during training and learn from them. For me, the next shots would be for real.
And this was Born Again Sniper from SEAL Team 6. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to be honest, smart, and beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.